Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for an extraordinary day, to our speakers, our moderators, and everyone who brought such insight to the conversation today. Thank you. I want to close by sort of reflecting on what we heard today, because I think the arc of today tells a story, although almost as if by design. We began with Senator Markey reminding us that universal service was never a narrow technical objective. It was and remains a moral and democratic claim. Access to education, economic opportunity, civic participation must be available to everyone, regardless of geography, income, age, or background. That is what we're really talking about when we're talking about universal connectivity: the means of participation, the connective tissue of society. What I also heard was that we should not think of connectivity as a gift or charity or even a subsidy. The internet was built on public investment, on DARPA research, on NSF grants, on spectrum licensed from the public airways, on rights of way granted across public land. I think of universal connectivity as one way to ensure that the value created with public resources accrues to the public. Then we heard in our first panel about the story of the law itself, the extraordinary tale of the law. They passed a law, a wildly bipartisan law, a law that looked to the future but did not lose sight of the public interest. Not because everybody agreed on everything, not that some people didn't have to be strong-armed occasionally, but because there was a shared recognition that communications infrastructure was too important to be left to chance. If there's a lesson for us now, it's not nostalgia, it is possibility, that this was a bipartisan issue then and should be one today. Our second panel turned to implementation, where we were reminded in great detail that the devil is always in the details. There's passing the law, then there's defending what was passed, and now there's trying to actually do the thing that was passed. That conversation could not be more timely, as we're on the brink of the largest broadband deployments in our history. The work right now is to guarantee that the institutions and the people charged with carrying out have what they actually need to succeed. And finally, a conversation about structural reform, mechanisms of social control, what I would most clearly think of as why there ought to be a law, and maybe an agency or an independent commission, but something, a call to action. For those of us that work on universal connectivity issues, sometimes it's easy to be ambivalent about the modern internet. It fragments our attention. It can be extractive, exploitative. It is, what's the word? It sucks. I imagine we have all at some point thought that we were all better off before, that the internet corrodes attention, community, civic life. And that's not wrong as a cultural observation. It's really not. But it is a critique that can only be taken seriously by people for whom connectivity is already a given. The option to refuse has to exist before the refusal can be meaningful. Yes, the river is polluted, but people still need drinking water. And people do need connectivity. The internet is not optional infrastructure anymore. It's the substrate upon which political voice, economic opportunity, healthcare, education, and civic life increasingly operate. Being offline in 2026, is not simply about being inconvenienced. It is to be structurally excluded from labor markets that have moved online, from government services that require digital interfaces, from medical literature, the jobs boards, the financial tools, and the civic forums. Thinking about what else has changed in the last 30 years, we also acknowledge that connectivity is not a binary, if it ever was. A person sharing a phone with a shattered screen and spotty service is not connected in the same way as a person with reliable broadband, a capable device, and the digital literacy to use it. Connectivity has to be more universal, yes, but also more comprehensive and more meaningful. A map that shows broadband availability at an address says nothing about whether a family in that home can afford to subscribe, has a device capable of modern tasks, or has the skills to navigate the internet. Universal connectivity must address not just whether a connection exists, but whether it is fast enough to be useful, affordable enough to be sustainable, and whether users possess the literacy and devices to use it effectively. And the internet needs to be safer, kinder, healthier, better, that the river is cleaned up and the water is safe to drink. That is the work ahead of us and what I think I heard a lot of all of you say today. This is the work that we would like to do in partnership with all of you. On September 24th, we will reconvene here to focus on what has changed in technology, in industry, and in government. We will know how the Supreme Court has decided to weigh in on that. And we'll ask what those changes require of broadband policy going forward. What we need now, what I've heard very clearly today, is not a return to the specific mechanisms of 1996, which were built for a different technological era, but a renewed commitment to the principles that animated the law. In a democratic society, the infrastructure for telecommunication and participation must never be a privilege reserved for some, but a right shared by all. We only have the room for about 10 more minutes, so this is my polite way to say skedaddle. But your assignment is this. Please talk about today, talk about what universal service could mean for the next 30 years, and bring that thinking and the best thinkers with you when we reconvene in September. Thank you so much.